On Sunday, June 22nd, 1958, a woman's body was found along a service road on the grounds of Arroyo High School in El Monte, California. A group of little leaguers and their coaches spotted her. She was Caucasian, red-headed, and fair-skinned, approximately 40 years of age. She was lying flat on her back a few inches off of the curb line. Her right arm was bent upward, and her right hand was resting just above her head. Her left arm was bent at the elbow and draped across her midriff. Her left hand was clenched and legs were outstretched. One of the coaches ran across Tyler Avenue and used a payphone that stood at the dairy that is now a McDonald's. So probably about 5 years ago, I'd say, it was 2015, I was scrolling through Netflix and I come across this project or movie or documentary titled Feast of Death. So clicked it and checked it out. And I had heard of James Ellroy before from LA Confidential. You know, I don't know much else about him, at least at that point I didn't. And I watched it, and I've watched it a lot, The Feast of Death. I mean, I've watched it a lot this year. I've watched it a lot back when it was on Netflix. You know, now I can check it out on YouTube or whatever. I didn't get the book right away, My Dark Places, which covers the murder of James Ellroy's mother, which is who we mentioned in the opening here. It was June 21st is a Saturday night. June 22nd is when they found her. So, Feast of Death has James Ellroy sitting with a group of LAPD detectives. Nick Nolte comes in there too for a little bit and has a seat with them, and they discuss crime, LA crime. They discuss the murder of James's mother. They discuss Elizabeth Short's murder. A very, very interesting project. If you guys ever want to check it out, it's called Feast of Death. So anyways, it took me about 5 years to finally get My Dark Places. I should have got it a lot sooner. But I finally got it and read it this year. And it was, I zipped right through that thing. It was intense, It starts you right off with the first line saying some kids found her, and that's what it was. It was a group of little leaguers and a few coaches that were going on a Sunday morning to the playing field there at Arroyo High School, and that's where they come across the body of Jean Ellroy. So the way it lays out in My Dark Places, he describes Tyler Avenue as running north and south, and Kings Row, which was the service road on the grounds of Arroyo High School, running east and west. Well, as it stands now, that was 62 years ago. Now, north and south, the street there is Santa Anita Avenue. And Kings Row is still called Kings Row. So I'm assuming that, that the street name's changed. Her body was found 63 feet west of the first lock gate onto the grounds. You'll see she was here. There's a crack. Let me show you the crack in the concrete. The divider in the concrete. You'll note this. And then when I reference Feast of Death, you'll see where her body was found somewhere in here. I'm referencing that. But it's pretty close. The McDonald's in front of me was a dairy before. So one of the coaches ran across the street and called the police department from a payphone across the street. The only thing I don't know of in regards to Kings Row, at least from the research that I did do on it, I notice now that as it heads west on the grounds, it banks right and it goes north for about I want to say 180 feet or something until it cuts over to Santa Anita Avenue. I'd imagine back then it did not do that. At least it wasn't mentioned in the book. I think back then Kings Row just went straight over to Tyler Avenue. So the interesting thing about the body dump there was on the east side of Kings Row is Cedar Avenue, and there's locked gates on that side. So the only way the killer got in was through Kings Row from Tyler Avenue. And I think that's very interesting to have somebody roll in there, and whether or not he committed the murder there, I mean, we'll discuss that a little bit later, to know that there's only one way in and one way out. So he'd have to go in, do his business, and U-turn out of there. So law enforcement were called, detectives rolled up, officers rolled up, but the two detectives taking charge of this case when they got there was a Sergeant Ward Hallinan and Jack Lawton. So, it was their scene at that point. At first sight, it appeared she may have been strangled by her brassiere because it was up around her neck. She did have one stocking on her left leg. The right one was gone. There were visible bruises and lacerations on her inner thighs, as well as a drag mark on her left hip. There was a broken car antenna in the road, and there were pearls, like off of a pearl necklace, sprawled about on the gravel there. Because her brassiere was up around her neck, investigators initially thought she was strangled by her bra, but that wasn't the case. As I mentioned before, she had one of her nylons was left on her left leg, and the right one was gone. Well, upon further review of the body, there were two things around her neck. Now, the first one was described as like a Venetian blind cord. At first, the investigators thought that it was her bra, that she was strangled with her bra because it was up around her neck. But upon looking at the body further, they found two things around her neck that strangled her. Now, the first one was like a cotton cord that you would have on Venetian blinds that you would pull down to open or close them, this type of thing. That was wrapped around her neck and knotted. So on one side of the knot on the Venetian cord, the rope was broken, which is why he put the right stocking of Jean around her neck to finish the job. Because, I mean, that's clear cut as far as why there would be two things around her neck. The first one failed, or he thought it failed, or maybe she was still breathing after it broke. At any rate, he wanted to finish the job, so he took her right stocking off, put that around her neck, and finished. I mentioned the pearls sprawled out on the ground in the gravel. Detectives strung that back together, and it was a perfect fit for Jean's necklace. So during the struggle, that all got busted up and dropped on the ground. The coroner rolled the body, and there was insect bites on her skin. And this is what happens on a lot of cases where a body is dumped in grass, or even doesn't even have to be grass. Once they lay there and they lay there long enough, it's going to attract insects. And she had numerous bites along her back. There was dew on her back as well. And dew on her back is a clear sign that she was dumped before sunrise. So the coroner guessed at that point how long she had been dead, and he was guessing about 8 to 12 hours. So right there on Kings Row, they placed Jean face up on a gurney. They stripped her down. They found dried blood on her right hand, as well as a laceration in the middle of her forehead. She was measured at about 66 inches, probably a $135. Her liver temperature was 90 degrees, and this led the coroner to call time of death between 3 and 5 a.m.